Good evening. Police have arrested 4 young demonstrators involved in a radical protest against mainland shoppers and parallel traders in Tuen Mun. There were ugly scenes as the protesters began their action in Shengshui and ended up in Tsim Sha Tsui. Protesters began gathering outside Shengshui MTR station at 3 p.m. for their sightseeing trip. The rally was prompted by calls on social media for another protest against parallel traders and mainland shoppers, causing overcrowding, inflation, and inconvenience in border districts. After the rowdy and violent behavior that marred similar demonstrations over the past few weeks, police were out in force to prevent trouble. But there were fewer parallel traders and suitcase-wheeling mainland shoppers around today, with many staying away to avoid trouble. This protester complained that police officers had pulled him aside for no reason, searched his bag, and asked to see his ID card. There were several scuffles between protesters and counter-demonstrators defending mainland shoppers. This woman was accused of hitting a protester. Some waved British colonial-era flags. Protesters complained that Chief Executive Lan Chenying is unwilling to ask Beijing for a cap on the multiple entry visa scheme that allows Shenzhen residents to come to Hong Kong as many times as they like.
It's because we already voiced out many times about this problem, about the multi-entry visa problem, and still we see is our government still ignore our request. So I hope that CY can listen our voice and improve this problem.
About an hour into the rally, organizers suddenly announced they would relocate to Tuen Mun because of the heavy police presence in Shengshui. Many of them went into a Tuen Mun shopping mall frequented by mainland visitors, where they heckled shoppers from across the border and targeted businesses catering to them. 4 young protesters were arrested, one of them aged just 13. Police said they were involved in clashes as protesters attacked people with suitcases and trolleys. They also tried to block buses on the route from Tuen Mun Town Center to Shenzhen Bay Port, which is heavily used by parallel traders. The protesters then moved on to Tsim Sha Tsui to carry on with a radical demonstration. Over in Beijing, Shenzhen Mayor Xu Qin refused to say whether the multiple entry visa scheme should be tightened. Without mentioning the protests in Hong Kong, Xu urged residents on both sides of the border to respect each other while sharing mutual benefits. The head of China's parliament has declared that Beijing was right to impose its controversial framework for Hong Kong's chief executive election. Zhang Dejiang has made it clearer than ever that Beijing will not give in to demands for a change in that framework. ATV's Emily Siu reports.
National People's Congress Chairman Zhang Dejiang had a clear message for Hong Kong as he delivered his annual work report in Beijing's Great Hall of the People this afternoon. The top state leader in charge of Hong Kong affairs said Beijing was right to impose its controversial framework for the 2017 chief executive election. The NPC Standing Committee has the constitutional responsibility to ensure the correct implementation of the Basic Law and to push the development of Hong Kong's political system in accordance with the law, Zhang declared. The ongoing annual session of China's top legislature has left no doubt that Beijing will not back down in the face of pan-democrat lawmakers' threat to veto the final package of political reform proposals put before them this summer. The package being put together by the SAR government will be unveiled next month and is sticking to Beijing's framework, which is expected to screen out chief executive hopefuls from the opposition camp. In his speech today, Zhang also mentioned plans to beef up the country's national security laws by increasing counter-espionage and anti-terrorism efforts. A local delegate to the NPC recently triggered a storm by suggesting China's legislation should be directly applied to Hong Kong before the SAR enacts its own relevant laws. But the idea was rejected by Beijing loyalists themselves.
Foreign Minister Wang Yi has promised that China will not give up the search for the missing Malaysian airliner that disappeared 1 year ago with 239 people on board. In a big disappointment for the families of the victims, Malaysian authorities offered no new clues in the investigative report they released today. ATV's Joyce Wu reports. On the one-year anniversary of the disappearance of Malaysian Airlines flight MH370, families of the mostly Chinese passengers gathered in Beijing's Yonghe Temple to pray for their loved ones. But the media were barred from entering by security guards and plainclothes policemen. With no one able to confirm what happened to the doomed flight and the 239 people on board, their families are complaining they've been kept in the dark, and many are clinging to the hope that their loved ones are still alive. With that in mind, Foreign Minister Wang Yi promised the search for the missing plane would continue, despite talk of it winding down as international rescue teams have not found a trace of it till date. Today must be a tough day for the family members of those on board, Wang said. Our hearts are with you. Over in Australia, families of the victims are also hoping for some type of closure.
Because there's nothing been answered. And we've got no idea where or how or what's happened. And that hasn't changed in the 12 months. Not a thing.
They received no real answers from the Malaysian government today, as it released an interim investigative report containing mostly technical information that is already known.
In the months ahead, the investigation team will need to analyze, to draw conclusions and safety recommendations based on the factual information that have been gathered.
Beijing-bound flight MH370 vanished from radar screens shortly after taking off from Kuala Lumpur on this day last year. Investigations suggested the aircraft was deliberately flown thousands of miles off course before eventually crashing into the Indian Ocean. Pilot suicide has been floated as a possible theory, but the report out today says there was no indication of unusual behavior among the cockpit or cabin crew. Investigators said the captain of the doomed flight did not have any financial, emotional or other problems that would have cast suspicion on him.
The sole objective of the investigation of an accident or incident shall be prevention of future accidents or incidents. It is not the purpose of this activity to apportion blame or liability.
Along with China, Malaysia and Australia have promised to carry on with one of the longest and costliest searches in aviation history.
We owe it to the families of the dead. We owe it to the travelling public to do whatever we reasonably can to resolve this mystery. As long as there are reasonable leads, the search will go on. We've got 60,000 square kilometres that is the subject of this search. If that's unsuccessful, there's another 60,000 square kilometres that we intend to search. And as I said, we are reasonably confident of finding the plane.
Foreign Minister Wang Yi has indicated that Japan's Prime Minister may be invited to China for a grand military parade to mark the 70th anniversary of the end of the Second World War. ATV's Arthur Kiola reports.
As China prepares to celebrate 70 years since the end of the Second World War, its ties with Japan are still strained by ongoing maritime territorial disputes and Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe's hawkish policies. But Foreign Minister Wang Yi indicated today that Beijing may invite Abe to a grand military parade planned for September. We'll extend the invitation to the leaders of all relevant countries and international organizations, and we welcome the participation of anyone who is sincere about coming, said Wang when asked whether Abe would be invited. But he stressed that Japan must not lose its conscience about its wartime aggression. Beijing is embroiled in territorial disputes with other neighboring countries as well. But the foreign minister defended plans to carry out reclamation on the Spratlys, disputed islands in the South China Sea. We're not like some countries which have carried out illegal building in other people's home, and we won't accept unwarranted remarks about work on our own home, he stressed. Arthur Urquiola, ATV News.
Back in Hong Kong, 5 more people have died of severe flu, taking the season's death toll to above 350. Health Minister Ko Weng-man has played down concerns about the flu vaccine's possible side effects. Here's Emily Siu.
It's been a tough flu season for Hong Kong as a mutated strain of the dominant H3N2 virus claims hundreds of lives. The government has been urging people to get vaccinated, but now it's facing concerns about side effects. It's been confirmed that a 36-year-old medical worker at Queen Mary Hospital contracted a neuromuscular disease after receiving his flu jab last month. Myasthenia gravis is an illness that interrupts the normal communication between nerves and muscles, which are left weak and fatigued. This morning, Health Minister Ko Wing-man did not rule out a direct link between the vaccine and the illness. But he played down the chances of such side effects. Risks come with any medicine and vaccines, Ko said, but the risks that come with flu jabs are relatively low. The health chief stressed there's no scientific document that suggests the current flu vaccine can cause neuromuscular disorders. But he acknowledged more tests must be done before reaching a definite conclusion in this particular case. Ko expressed confidence that the current flu epidemic has already reached its peak and the number of infections will drop gradually. Asked if it will end in April as usual or last until May, he couldn't say for sure. According to figures from the Center for Health Protection, although the number of flu cases is very high, the overall situation is relatively stable, Ko said.
The government has marked International Women's Day by promising to boost childcare services to free up mothers so they can join the workforce. Concerned groups are complaining not enough is being done. Here's Arthur Akiola.
About a dozen demonstrators representing the DAB's Women's Affairs Committee and their supporters marked International Women's Day outside government headquarters this morning. They demanded better childcare services for working mothers, so more of them can enter or re-enter the workforce.
Because nowadays not a lot of Hong Kong women are working, we believe that Hong Kong women can be a very powerful working force if the government can do more to release this power.
Chief Secretary Carrie Lam supported their calls while attending an event to mark Women's Day.
The government is committed to creating an enabling environment for promoting women employment through a multi-pronged approach, so that women who wish to join or rejoin the job market would have more options, taking into account their own and family needs. At the same time, the government will enhance childcare services to provide better support for women to take care of their families while at work.
Starting this year, the administration plans to do this by increasing the number of childcare places operating at extended hours, from the current 1,200 to 6,200.
And also we'll be encouraging private corporations to provide on-site childcare places for their own staff. But in fact, there are 3 private corporations already doing it now, and we are encouraging more to follow suit. And at the same time, the government will lead by example. We will have a major government complex coming up in Jiangguan-o by the year 2022.
The administration is studying the feasibility of providing on-site childcare services for civil servants at the new facility, which will house the immigration headquarters. Arthur Akiola, ATV News.
Sports now, and in football, Real Madrid were unable to increase their lead at the top after losing to Atletico Bilbao in the latest La Liga matches. ATV's An Chang reports.
Real Madrid